this interesting lecture, which is entitled this: How close are we to an autism cure? Anybody interested in that in this room? So the word cure in medicine implies abolished, right? Gone with no risk of coming back. If I tell you you're cured of cancer, you're supposed to no longer worry about reoccurrences, right? As opposed to remission. And when we talk about remission, you're concerned about your next office visit and what it's going to tell you, right? If you're in remission. So the cure word is real in autism. There are some individuals that have already been cured. They don't have autism. They're not at risk for remission. They're on with their lives. They're in their 20s. They're doing great. They're home free. That exists. Now, it doesn't exist for every kid, and the purpose of this lecture is to talk about why. So here's the bottom line. It really depends on what you think you're treating. Are you treating autism? Good luck with that. And that's kind of a behavioral intervention because autism is defined behaviorally. But really, what you're treating, in my opinion, is this massive environmental immunological insult on your kids during critical times of development, some of which we can repair. In some cases, a lot of it we can repair and restore. But in other cases, we kind of hit these roadblocks. And some of you are sitting here really frustrated that you've done lots of good stuff. And please quiet those phones for me. God bless you. Lots of good stuff, and still haven't seen the kind of results that some of the people that come up on the stage talk about. You're going to have some moms tell you that they did this or that, and their kid is like all normal now, and it just frustrates there's another word I wanted to use there, the heck out of you, doesn't it? Doesn't it just kind of, isn't it tough to sit there? I mean, you're happy for that person who's all better and their kid's all better, but you still got your kid at home who isn't all better. Makes me want to cry. Truly. So I'm very blessed to have a lot of great colleagues that I work with, and I don't want to take credit for being the genius that thought this all up, but I'm smart enough to collaborate with a lot of smart people, and with our collective intelligence, we can start to put together some good things. So Marco, Nicola, and Dario, I've published with, I've done research with, we're still collaborating, we're still designing new things, and this is my Italian cohort. Doug Johnson is a genius when it comes to laser treatment. We're not getting into laser today. We're going to talk about lasers tomorrow. So just to kind of give you a setup, today is kind of an introduction to the medical literature in terms of what you're actually treating. What are you really trying to treat? Tomorrow is, how do we get you better? There's a little bit of that this afternoon as well at my lecture at 5 o'clock. So first of all, if we're going to cure autism, so what is autism? So you got some ideas? It's a mess. It's a pain in the you-know-what. It's an experience that has matured me as a human being a lot. So it's been a amazing journey. It's been a great journey, getting to know the families and the children and seeing what they go through and how dedicated you are as parents. I never really was someone who grew up wanting to be a parent. That wasn't on my bucket list. So by the time I graduated from medical school, I wanted to be a test pilot in the Air Force, did that. I wanted to travel the world. I've kind of done that because of autism. I probably wouldn't have traveled the world without autism. But then I became a parent of a kid with autism, and I'm going to tell you his story at the end. So let's see what it is. This is my favorite one, child behaving badly to make the parents crazy, number one. That's kind of the behavioral concept, okay? But that really doesn't help us very much. And they're not behaving badly because they want to make you crazy. They're behaving badly to adapt what it is that's going on with them. They're in pain. They can't control the dopamine in their head. They can't relax. They can't calm down. They got to do something with all of that. We'll talk about that some more this afternoon. Is it a gut microbiome disorder that affects the brain, or is it an inflammatory bowel disease that affects the brain? And where did the inflammatory bowel disease come from? Did it come from the microbiome? Did it come from some other toxin? Interesting questions. Is it an allergy of the brain? All of these things, by the way, are in the medical literature. I'll show you some of the stuff. Is it a central mast cell disorder? That's Professor Theoharides' work out of Tufts. Or is it an abnormal endocannabinoid signaling? This is the work that I'm getting behind and doing some research in that area along with Dario. and Nicola, as well as researchers at the Max Planck Institute in Germany. So we think that you can trace the roots of autism back to an endocannabinoid disruption/deficiency. And I'll explain what on earth that is. It's not because you didn't smoke marijuana in college, and it's not because you're not smoking marijuana now. It's a critical, natural occurring pathway in the body, very much like how we regulate insulin or how we regulate thyroid hormone. So is it an inflammatory change in microglia, which are immune cells that live in the brain, or is it an abnormal blood-brain barrier? It's all out there in the literature. Is it an infectious disease? Lyme disease. How many think Lyme disease is there? Okay. How many think it's measles? Well, measles is fading now. So HHV6, anybody got that one on their list? Okay. CMV, EBV, Epstein-Barr virus, the mononucleosis virus, HERVs, endogenous retroviruses and other weird bugs like that, mycoplasma, strep. Should have got a bunch of hands for strep. Now, did those cause it, or were they secondarily acquired because of a previous insult to the immune system that lowered the gates and allowed infectious diseases to come in? What do you think? Caused it, or the gates were down and stuff came in that shouldn't have come in and they couldn't deal with it? Notice the lack of answers at this part of the lecture. We'll get there. These are questions. This is the question time. So is it caused by parasites, or the other view is it's the absence of parasites? Both are in the literature. Is it caused by parasites? Or is it we don't have parasites, therefore we can't mature our immune system? You guys aren't into parasites, I can tell. So, but we're not done. There's more. So is it a form of vitamin D deficiency? I'm big on this one myself. This is a big one for me. Vitamin D deficiency at the right time of development can permanently alter the way the endocannabinoid system works. And the endocannabinoid system regulates just about everything. Is it a form of epilepsy? Or is epilepsy a consequence of whatever happened to insult the brain? Is it cerebral folate deficiency? There's lectures going on about that. And where did it come from? Why is there cerebral folate deficiency? Is it autoimmunity to cerebral folate receptors? And if so, why are you forming an immune reaction to folate receptors? What's going on with that? Where did it come from? Is it a brain autoimmune disease? There's lots of literature about autoimmunity to various brain structures in autism. Or is it the consequence of an insult to the brain that triggered an immune response, and now the immune system's trying to clean up what happened injury-wise to the brain? Did it happen in the womb or shortly thereafter? That's where most of the transcriptional studies that are looking at the DNA message are sending us back to very early in the development of these kids. Now, does that mean because it happened early, game, set, match, and it's done? No, there's plenty of kids who can recover from whatever that is. So is it a sulfation detoxification defect? You just can't get the sulfur groups around to detoxify and to run things and to manage your dopamine and to keep you clean from all those environmental insults. Is it a methylation deficit? There'll be lectures going on that. Is it tied into MTHFR? Anybody want to go for the MTHFR gene and blame that for autism? How about COMT? That's the wild and crazy gene. It's also the gene that makes you smart. So it's a gene that is there in the environment. It's kind of called a warrior gene, but it's also one of the genes that's associated with a higher IQ. So how do we take a gene that's associated with higher IQ and turn it into a vulnerability gene for autism? These are questions. Can you see what keeps me awake at night? Other than my wife's sleep disorder, but we'll talk about that later. So is it a form of unrecognized thyroid deficiency / disorder / autoimmunity to thyroid? How many of you are in the thyroid camp? Got a few of you there. Okay, good. You thought I was done. No, this goes on. This is the medical literature. This is what autism is. So is it a mitochondrial disorder? How many mito people here? All right. How did you get to be a mito person? How did you get to be mitochondrially wounded? Is it a mitochondrial gene? How many think the genes went bad from the mitochondria? How many think the environment screwed up the mitochondria and they need help? Okay, great. Is it oxidative stress? The lecture after this is talking about oxidative stress. Is it oxidative stress? If so, where did it come from? Why do we have oxidative stress? That's kind of like biological rust. Where's that coming from? Is it an altered gene? Do we have a genetic epidemic of autism? How many of you think autism is a genetic epidemic? No hands. See, now, I used to say that there's no way in the world you can have a genetic epidemic, and I want to retract that statement publicly. You can have a genetic epidemic. It's called genotoxicity, and poisons, which we're going to talk about in this, can actually poison the ova, the egg, before it forms a baby, or the sperm, the spermatozoa, can be poisoned in a way that disrupts the DNA that isn't transmitted to the DNA of the individual. So you, mom and dad, may be fine, but your offspring may be actually going through genetic mutations in the process of forming because of the environmental insult. So you can have not just a pure genetic epidemic, but a consequential genetic epidemic due to environmental toxins. And Stephanie's shaking her head, and thank you for agreeing with me. Stephanie Seneff is here. So is it an environmental toxic insult? Mercury, aluminum, glyphosate, pesticides, plastics, flame retardants, car exhaust, jet fuel stabilizer, every one of those is in the medical literature associated with causing autism. EMF, microwave, cell phones, high tension wires. How many of you are in the EMF camp? So you got to have a few clean heart followers here, okay? Dietrich has been talking about this for a long time, and he's not wrong. It's in the medical literature. Is it alteration in the physics of the brain, the entropy of the brain? How many of you would like to give a lecture on entropy in the brain? Do we have any physicists here? So entropy is a really important concept. We're going to talk about that this afternoon with MRT because entropy really does run a lot of what's going on with the brain in autism. So high entropy is high randomness. Autism is a very random communication disorder within the confines of brain communication. It's a lot of inefficiency. It's too much heat for the brain to manage, and the brain adapts to that by slowing down its frequencies, which makes it less easy for people to use their brain. Alteration in the physics of the brain is a big deal, and we're going to get to that. So this is kind of what it looks like to me. So how many of you are on this road right now? Okay. This is my life. This is my highway. People walk into the office and they put this down in front of me. It's a stack of records this big and say, okay, so here's my highway. And somewhere along the line, we've missed a turn, okay? Society, environmentally, regulators have missed a turn, and the turn that they missed has put our kids on the danger zone. We are in the danger zone. We have 1 in 10 children that can't develop normally. Autism may be 1 in 30 boys, but 1 in 10 children cannot develop normally. At least, that's the minimum.